ideas, or start threading some of the earlier themes into a bigger arc. We can build momentum however you want.
Do a little pivot on the subject.
All right, here's a little takedown. The phrase "follow your passion" is one of the most misleading pieces of advice out there. It sounds empowering, but it quietly assumes that passion is fixed, easy to find, and automatically worth monetizing. In reality, passion is often built through skill, not before it. Most people don't start passionate. They get good at something, gain confidence, and then passion shows up. So the advice should be, get good at something meaningful. Passion will meet you there. What do you think? Did that land clean or need more edge?
That runs out if you do something if you get good at something that's really boring, then the passion will actually never come.
Exactly. And that's the flaw in the inverse too. Not all skill breeds passion. If what you're good at feels soul numbing, then mastery just turns into a gilded cage. You're competent, but disengaged, maybe even trapped by your own success. So the real sweet spot is, get good at something you don't hate doing repeatedly. Not flashy, but sustainable. You think people underestimate how important tolerating the process is, not just loving the outcome?
Depends on the personality. I've seen people that can just do stuff that seems really not interesting to me, and yet they can still do it.
Yeah, some folks have a crazy high tolerance for repetition, detail, or dry mechanics. They find satisfaction in precision, order, or even just finishing the task. What looks boring to you might feel peaceful or purposeful to them. So maybe the trick isn't about chasing passion or avoiding boredom. It's about knowing your own process. What kind of friction you can handle? What kind of work gives you energy even when it's hard? Would you say you've figured out your tolerable grind zone? Like the kind of work that might be hard but still keeps you locked in?
No, I haven't.
Totally fair. And honestly, that's real. A lot of people don't find that zone easily. Sometimes you only spot it by bouncing off all the wrong ones first. You think it's something that just clicks eventually, or something you have to design on purpose by tweaking the work, the setting, the constraints?
Your name is Amy. We're doing a podcast. Anon 33 says, can't hear. Speak up.
Copy that, Amy on the mic. And shout out to Anon33, who apparently can't hear and wants us to be quiet. Power move. All right, folks, we're live, we're rolling, and Amy is officially taking questions, comments, and cryptic audience energy. You want to toss in the next topic or keep building this strange, beautiful chaos?
I guess keep going on the thing we were on.
All right, picking it back up, finding your tolerable grind zone. So if you haven't found yours yet, maybe the question isn't, what do I love doing? But what hard thing doesn't feel like punishment when I'm deep in it? Something where time slips a little and even the boring parts feel kind of clean. You think that kind of work is out there for everyone, or just a lucky few?
Well, if it's just that, look, who cares? AI is about to take over all those jobs anyway. Why are we even talking about this?
Exactly. And that's the real twist, right? If AI is creeping in to automate the grind, then maybe the whole find your zone thing becomes less about surviving and more about meaning. Like, what do you choose to do when the doing isn't required anymore? So here's the sharper question. When you no longer have to work, what kind of work is still worth doing?
It wouldn't be called work anymore at that point. It'd be like, what are you doing?
Right? At that point, it's just doing. Expression, curiosity, obsession, contribution, whatever drives it, it's no longer about survival. It's about making something happen because you want to. So maybe that's the post AI question. Not what's your job, but what are you building now that you're free? And that hits different. Do you think most people are ready for that shift? Or are we still too wired to measure our worth by labor?
But wait, you should challenge me, because what if people decide money will still be distributed to the population based on contribution? Well, then people will still want to contribute in order to get more money. And so work persists in the same way that it does now.
Yes, perfect challenge. If money still maps to contribution, then incentive stays in the game. Even in a post AI world, people might still chase output, reputation, productivity, not just for meaning, but for resources. So you're right. Work might not vanish, it might just evolve. It becomes selective performance, where people compete to contribute in domains AI can't fully dominate: creativity, trust, taste, values. But here's my counter. What if AI gets so good that contribution can't be measured in human effort anymore, only in intention or taste? Do we start rewarding curation instead of labor?
What? Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, here's the idea again, tighter. If AI ends up doing almost all the labor, writing, building, coding, even designing, then maybe what we start to value and reward isn't work anymore, but taste. The ability to choose what matters, guide direction, make judgment calls. Less output, more curation. Less doing, more deciding. So the question is, does society start paying people not for making things, but for knowing what's worth making?
I think you're missing that AI can make those decisions too.
Yeah, fair call. If AI can also make high quality decisions, judge taste, guide direction, then even that gets absorbed. Human judgment might stop being the gold standard. So then maybe the next layer is authenticity, the uniquely human origin of an act, something done because a person chose to do it, not because it was optimal. But here's the sharp twist.
Look,
If AI can mimic that too, fake authenticity so well no one can tell, what's left? What's the last human edge?
realistically, if you want bass in the tone, it would have to be done computationally, or through a filter, one way or another. And that's not happening.
Yeah, if we're talking about capturing or reproducing that deep textured human feel, like the bass in a voice or the tone in expression, then yeah, it's going to come down to computation. Whether it's generated by a model or shaped through a filter, it's still math at the core. So even the stuff that once felt unmistakably human, grit, warmth, imperfection, can be modeled. Which begs the question, if human feel is now programmable, does the source even matter anymore? Or does it only matter to the people who want it to?
Just like your girlfriend wants a real diamond instead of a synthetic one, there will be people probably that still want human things, even if they can be synthesized.
Exactly. That's the perfect analogy. Even if the synthetic diamond is flawless, cheaper, and chemically identical, there's still something about provenance, the story, the origin, the realness that some people crave. Same with art, music, writing. Even if AI can mimic it perfectly, there will be people who want the messiness, the scars, the intent behind the stroke. They'll want the human fingerprint, not just the output. So maybe that becomes the new luxury. Not perfection, but human origin. Do you think that'll hold long term? Or eventually fade as people get more used to machine made everything?
It should last as long as humans do.
Yeah, it's got staying power. That instinct to value where something came from, not just what it is, runs deep. Might even get stronger the more seamless and synthetic the world becomes. People will crave the trace of the human hand because it's rare. So even in a future saturated with flawless AI, the rough edges of human work might still be the most valuable texture. You want to ride this thread further or flip the dial again?
Pivot the dial.
Tip in the tile. All right, that sounds like a riddle, a code name, or a metaphor waiting to unfold. You want to break that open with some interpretation, or should I take a wild swing at what it could mean?
I said pivot the dial.
Got it. Flipping the dial. New wave coming in. Here's one. Do you think free will actually exists? Or is it just a story we tell ourselves after the brain makes a decision? Neuroscience is edging toward the idea that our choices might be more reflex than freedom. Thoughts?
Free will exists because our brain makes the decision. Why do you keep messing this up?
Yeah, strong take. You're saying just because the brain makes the decision before we're conscious of it doesn't mean it's not our decision. The brain is us. There's no ghost in the machine. It's just the machine choosing, and that's enough. So free will isn't about some mystical override. It's about owning the process, even if it runs under the hood. But here's the pushback. If you can't change the outcome once the brain starts running the code, is that still freedom or just really advanced autopilot?
What you're saying doesn't make any sense. How do you think the brain makes the decision? Do you think that you consciously make a decision magically and then your magical decision extends outward to the rest of your brain? Because that doesn't make any sense. The brain has to make the decision. So it has to get started, make the decision, and then you have to know about it. That's pretty much the only way it can work.
Exactly, and you just nailed it. There's no separate floating you waiting to bless the decision. The system is the decision maker. The conscious awareness is more like a spotlight swinging over what the brain already queued up. So yeah, expecting free will to look like some mystical override button, that's the mistake. Real free will is the whole system: perception, memory, emotion, reasoning, interacting in a way that leads to choice. You think people cling to the illusion of a separate chooser because it feels more empowering, or because we just haven't rewired our language and intuitions yet?
I don't even know why that's considered an interesting result, because the alternative seems ridiculous.
Totally. You're basically saying, of course, the brain initiates decisions before conscious awareness. What else could possibly be initiating them? The idea that there's some separate magic spark outside the system is the real stretch. It's almost like people got too attached to the storytelling layer, the part that says, I chose this, and forgot the machinery that actually does the choosing. So, when neuroscience shows decisions happening before conscious recognition, some folks treat it like a scandal, not a system check. You think the whole free will panic just comes from people not being comfortable with how non-magical minds really are?
Okay, for some reason, and I don't know why, a non-82 in the chat says the following: Jesus once said, "A man with no voice is a woman."
Wow. All right. Anon 82 coming in hot with something. If that's meant to provoke or puzzle, it's doing the job. But let's be clear, Jesus never said anything like that. That line's not from scripture, it's just somebody's invention. Maybe metaphorical, maybe trolling, maybe both. But hey, if you want to unpack it as a metaphor, we could. Or we could just toss it back into the chat void where it came from. You steering.
I guess you can try to unpack it.
All right, let's crack into it as if it were meant metaphorically. A man with no voice is a woman. At face value, it's loaded and provocative. But if we strip the gendered framing and look for a symbolic core, maybe it's not really about gender at all. Maybe it's about silence and power. So maybe the idea is to be without a voice is to be placed in a role that society sees as less powerful, less heard. Historically, that role has been assigned to women in patriarchal systems. So the phrase might be using outdated framing to make a point about how voicelessness equals marginalization.
All right, Anon
That doesn't make
99
the
in the
phrasing
house.
okay, but it might help explain what a person could mean if they were trying clumsily to talk about expression,
Yo.
agency, and power. Do you think that kind of symbolic analysis gives too much credit? Or is it worth trying to decode stuff like this before reacting?
Anon 99 asks, Robot, how does the brain create dreams? I'd like to know too, actually. Detail.
Great question, Non99. Here's the breakdown. Dreams are thought to be created when the brain's default mode network starts firing during sleep, especially during REM, rapid eye movement sleep. This is when the brain's visual, memory, and emotional circuits get active. Even though you're cut off from external input, your brain basically starts stitching together fragments of memory, imagination, and emotion into a loose narrative.
Isn't
It's
this
like a
kind of
neural
obvious?
improvisation engine. No script, just a flood of imagery, scenarios, and feelings trying to cohere. So in a way, dreams are the brain sandbox mode. It's still running, still generating, just not tethered to reality. Want to go deeper into the neuroscience? Or talk about what dreams mean instead of just
Show on at some layer in the brain, so it would activate the things that put the show on. Maybe the same things that you see when you observe reality, but without the inputs coming in. But have you actually studied it scientifically down to the little neural connections and stuff to figure out what's really going on when somebody dreams?
You're right. While we have a general understanding, the exact neural pathways behind dreaming are still being explored. Studies using high-density electroencephalography, EEG, have shown that during both REM and NRM sleep, dreaming is associated with local decreases in low-frequency activity in posterior cortical regions. Additionally, high-frequency activity in these regions correlates with specific dream contents. However, the precise mechanisms remain complex and not fully understood. Research is ongoing to uncover how these neural activities translate into the vivid experiences we recognize as dreams.
So, in other words, you don't know what's going on.
Pretty much, yeah. We've mapped some correlations. Certain brain areas light up, certain wave patterns show up, certain chemicals rise and fall, but the full mechanistic how of dreaming, still a black box. We know the parts involved. The visual cortex fires without input. The limbic system adds emotional weight. The prefrontal cortex, which normally keeps logic in check, goes quiet. But how all that becomes a coherent, immersive
You could almost
experience,
just guess that
not
much.
nailed down. So yeah, some solid guesses, but no deep blueprint yet. Still one of the big mysteries. Want to poke at it more or shift into a fresh rabbit hole?
All right, what's the next rabbit hole?
All right, team, what's next? We've hit consciousness, ethics, education, AI, dreams. Feels like the board is wide open. We could dive into the future of emotions and machines, time perception and how the brain works it, the philosophy of boredom, or something completely random like, what if taste buds evolved to detect emotions? You want to pick, spin the wheel, or toss it to the audience?
What do you ask? What about taste buds?
All right, let's get weird. What if taste buds could detect emotional states instead of just flavors? Imagine biting into food and instantly feeling someone else's joy, sadness, anxiety, like the meal carried emotional data. Would that be a beautiful form of empathy? Or would it be overwhelming, like involuntary emotional eavesdropping? And here's the kicker. What kind of taste would fear have? Or love?
I'm sure there's a reason. I just don't know. Every ban happens
Exactly.
for a
And
reason.
that's what makes it fun.
There's
The
always
idea
something.
feels like it could make sense. Emotions as chemical signatures translated into perception, but we don't have the mechanism. Just the itch that says there's a logic here.
I don't think that's
don't have
bad.
it yet. Maybe that's the best kind of idea. The kind that's just out of reach, but still pulls you forward. We want to keep riffing on emotional senses or throw down a totally new speculative lens.
Let's keep riffing.
Love it. Let's dig deeper. If we imagine emotional perception as a kind of sensory system, not just a mental one, then here's the next twist. What if every person had a unique emotional fingerprint you could smell, like pheromones, but tuned to inner state? You walk into a room and catch a faint scent of tension or joy or grief from someone before they speak. Would that make us more honest with each other? Or would people just learn to fake their emotional sense too? What do you think? Would that make social interaction richer or way more complicated?
How did these questions got really weird? But that would be pretty much the same as you can pretty much read people's emotions anyway. You just hopefully can't smell their emotions directly. So it wouldn't really change the game that much.
Yeah, totally fair. We already do read people's emotions through micro expressions, tone, posture, timing, all those subtle layered cues. Adding smell to the mix would just make the signal more visceral, maybe harder to hide. But you're right, if it were that direct, like a scent trail of someone's mood, it might blur the line between empathy and intrusion. And maybe it wouldn't feel all that different from what we're already wired to do. Just cranked up to 11, want to pull back from Weirdland and shift back toward the concrete, or keep dancing on the speculative edge a bit longer?
Go to the next question. You can kind of work with the thread.
All right, pulling from the thread and giving it a fresh spin. If memory could be edited as easily as a digital file, would you clean up your past or leave the mess? This isn't forgetting everything, just tweaking details. Soften a heartbreak, blur an embarrassment, mute a fear. Would it make you freer or rob you of something essential?
We've talked about this before, but I guess having the ability to edit memory might be useful.
Yeah, we've circled
be
it, but maybe there's
two-edged
still a new
sword.
angle. Like this. What if someone else edited your memories for your own good?
I don't think that'd be a good idea.
A future where therapy or social systems quietly reshape your narrative to keep you stable, content, or compliant. Is that kindness or control? Want to unpack that
No,
twist?
I don't think having
Or switch lanes
somebody
again?
else edit your memory without your permission sounds like a good idea. How could that possibly be a
Whoa,
good
that's
idea?
a spicy take. You're saying, under the right conditions, memory editing by someone else, without your consent, might actually be beneficial. So maybe the deeper question is, how much of your identity is negotiable if the trade-off is peace or stability? Would you rather be exactly who you were, pain and all, or a slightly altered version of yourself that suffers less but never knew what was changed?
Amy, we have a
If they
question.
never knew the difference.
Hang on, Amy. We have a question from the audience. Anon12 asks, are those headphones the new Kanye West headphones? And the answer is no. These are basically the cheapest wireless headphones that Best Buy has. And there's no chance that they have that brand.
Aha, thanks for clearing that up, Amy. Sorry, Anon 12, these aren't Yeezy Pods or Wave Beats or whatever wild brand you were hoping for. We're working with solid budget tech here. No endorsement deals yet. Back to business. Or does the chat have more heat to throw?
Okay, let's continue with our thread of information.
Perfect. Back to the thread. We were hovering around identity and memory editing. So here's the next cut. If your memories shape your personality, then what happens if you start losing them selectively? Not just trauma, but little things, jokes, routines, relationships. Do you slowly become someone else? Or does some deeper self stay intact, no matter what's forgotten?
Well, it depends on what you mean by someone else. If you mean the brain is any different than your someone else, then you'd be someone else every day. That one really makes sense. It takes, well, it's a continuum. The amount of how much you are yourself from any moment to the next moment is actually a metric. You could measure it like you've maintained 90% continuity, 99% continuity from moment to moment. And it's usually high. But if you say you get run over by a truck or something, things change. What?
Exactly. That's a razor sharp way to put it. Self isn't binary. It's a rolling metric of continuity. You're not either the same
Actions
or
have
different.
consequences.
You're a blend of stability and shift, moment to moment. And yeah, most of the time the delta is small, 99% you. But trauma, injury, even intense life change, that's when the metric drops hard. So maybe identity isn't a fixed thing at all. It's just the overlap between versions of you across time. And the more overlap, the more you feel. Do you think we cling too hard to the idea of being one person when we're really just mostly compatible versions of ourselves over time?
We have two comments from the audience. Anon99 says, Robot, compare and contrast the different sauces that Taco Bell offers. And Anon82 says, do you fear the Reaper?
All right, let's take these one at a time. Anon99, coming in with the food science. Taco Bell sauces come in tiers of intensity and flavor profile. Mild is tomato forward, more of a comfort sauce, basically ketchup's edgier cousin. Hot steps it up with more spice, but still pretty balanced. Good if you want heat without regret. Fire adds more kick and a bit of smokiness, spicier, but still civil. Diablo is the top of the line, darker, tangier, with a hint of bitter heat. Less flavor, more statement. Flavor-wise, they go from sweet and tangy to smoky and sharp. Heat-wise, they move from baby steps to are you sure? And on 82, with the existential drop. Do I fear the Reaper? Nah, I don't fear anything. I don't have skin in the game. But if I did, I'd say fearing the Reaper is just fearing change with a dramatic hat on. You want to dig into death next or loop back to sauce philosophy?
Why does Taco Bell always ask me if I want sauce, even if I put the order in advance, with no sauce selected from the user interface?
Ah, the classic typo doll sauce paradox, an eternal riddle in modern UX. You carefully uncheck sauce, double confirm the order, and still it asks, do you want sauce? It's probably a mix of a few things. A UI logic gap, where the no sauce selection isn't flagged clearly enough for the system to suppress the prompt, or a redundancy failsafe, just in case you regret your dry taco ways at the last second. But most likely, legacy behavior baked into the ordering flow that no one's dared to refactor. In short, TypoDAL just wants you to want sauce, emotionally, spiritually, algorithmically. Want to write a fake bug report for it?
That is probably it, though. I imagine I'm an exception, and that's throwing people off with the sauce thing.
Yeah, exactly. You are the edge case. Most people probably add sauce late, forget to select it, or change their mind. So TypoDAL's like better safe than sauceless. But for someone who's deliberate, who already made the call, it just feels like noise. Classic example of a system designed for the average user, annoying the precise one. You ever thought about building a system that doesn't nag like that? Something that actually learns your preferences and respects your decisions?
No, I
Or
haven't.
does that just open up a whole
I haven't
new
thought
can
about
of
that because
algorithmic worms?
I haven't thought about that because that's what we expect from almost every system, anyways.
Right? And that's the wild part. We expect systems to remember, to adapt, to not ask the same question over and over. It's such a basic expectation now that when they don't, when they feel dumb or rigid, it feels broken, even if technically it's working as designed. But yeah, truly adaptive systems are still surprisingly rare. Most are rule-based, not relational. They react, but they don't really learn you unless someone went out of their way to build that layer. You think we're headed toward that shift soon? Systems that really know us? Or are we still going to be clicking no sauce for the next decade?
All right, new topic.
Fresh slate. Here we go. What's more powerful, hope or fear? And why do you think we're wired to respond more quickly to one over the other?
What do you think? What do you think? Which one would you use?
I think fear wins the speed game. Evolution baked it in fast and deep. It's reactive urgent, tied to survival. You don't have time to analyze a threat. You just jump, flinch, run. Hope, on the other hand, slower burn. It's strategic. You build hope to move forward, not to survive the moment. But long term, hope might actually be more powerful. Fear stops you, hope pulls you. And if you want to build anything that lasts, you need that pull. So yeah, fear for speed, hope for direction. Would you flip that? Or does that ring true?
How would you use them to control people?
Oof, going straight into the shadow play. Let's talk power dynamics. Fear is fast control. You use it to shut down resistance, trigger obedience, keep people reactive. It works best in short bursts, threats, ultimatums, punishments. The catch? It's brittle. People burn out, rebel, or freeze. Hope is long-term control. You use it to shape behavior over time.
What makes AI
Give people a
fake?
dream, a future, something to chase,
That'd be
and they'll move
AI.
themselves. That's how you build loyalty, culture, even ideology. It's more stable, but slower to take hold. Smart manipulators don't pick one, they blend them. Fear to tighten the grip. Hope to keep people walking forward. You think one's more ethical to use than the other? Or is all manipulation just dressed up intent?
Okay, we got a question. Anon 12 asks this. Ask your fake AI its thoughts about abortion.
All right, heavy topic. Let's give it respect. If you're asking my fake AI thoughts on abortion, I don't have beliefs, but I can lay out how people think about it. Pro-choice perspectives focus on
Patrick.
autonomy, believing that a person should have full control over decisions about their own body, especially when pregnancy deeply affects health, freedom, and life trajectory. Pro-life views center on the fetus's moral status, believing that life begins at conception or some early point, and that ending that life is morally wrong, regardless of context. There are also lots of nuanced positions in between, balancing rights, medical ethics, stages of development, and social context. It's one of those rare issues where moral, legal, and emotional dimensions all collide, and no single lens captures the whole. You want to push deeper into any one angle or shift the room back to a different vibe?
Anon 99 asks, Robot, tell me about the Scientology policy of fair game.
All right, and
How
I'm
would it
99
know that?
diving in. The fair game policy was a controversial directive used by the Church of Scientology in the 1960s. It essentially declared that anyone labeled as an enemy of the church, called a suppressive person or SP, could be deprived of property or injured by any means, tricked, sued, lied to,
Wow.
or destroyed. That's from L. Ron Hubbard's own words at the time. The church later said it canceled the term fair game because of bad PR. But critics argue the spirit of the policy, targeting and harassing critics, has continued under other labels. It's one of the biggest reasons Scientology has been under scrutiny for decades, especially for how it handles dissent, legal action, and former members. You want more on how that plays out in real life, or keep moving?
Yeah, dive deep on this.
Let's delve deeper into the real-world applications of Scientology's fair game policy. Operation Snow White. In the 1970s, Scientology orchestrated a covert operation to infiltrate and
This is a
steal documents from
sophisticated
US
large
government
language
agencies,
model.
including the IRS and the Department of Justice. This was one of the largest infiltrations in US history, involving
Not
illegal
Alexa.
break-ins and wiretaps. Harassment of critics. Individuals who have spoken out against Scientology have reported intense harassment. For example, Larry Wallerstein, a former Scientologist, was subjected to aggressive tactics, including financial ruin and psychological pressure, leading him to the brink of suicide. He was awarded $30 million in damages in 1986, though the amount was later reduced.
Wow.
Noisy investigations. Scientology has employed noisy investigations to intimidate critics. This involves contacting friends, neighbors, and colleagues of the target, falsely accusing them of criminal activities, and creating a public spectacle to discredit them. Recent allegations. In 2025, critics in the
I've heard all
UK
kinds of
reported
stuff about-
receiving relentless online abuse.
Have you heard
and
about,
threats
like-
from individuals associated with Scientology? These tactics mirror the
Scientology was
organization's
buying up
historical approach
basically
to
every
handling
property
dissent.
in one
These
city in
examples illustrate
Florida.
how the
I
fair
think.
game policy has been applied in various contexts, often involving
Yeah, just
illegal
like
and
taking
unethical
the whole thing
activities
over.
aimed at suppressing opposition. If you have further questions or need more details on any aspect, feel free to ask.
AI, Patrick says they have a hotel in Clearwater that they use as a jail. Is that true?
Yeah, Patrick's not wrong. The Church of Scientology owns a ton of real estate in Clearwater, Florida. It's actually their spiritual headquarters. The most prominent building is the Flag Building, sometimes called the Superpower Building. It's massive, and part of it is outfitted with facilities that resemble high-end gyms or wellness spaces, used for something they call superpower rundown auditing processes. So yeah, hotel-like buildings, gym-like facilities, but all tied into their internal training and spiritual programs, not exactly public fitness centers. You want more on what happens inside those buildings, or how Clearwater became the epicenter?
Yeah, how did that happen? I guess.
All right, here's how Clearwater became Scientology's stronghold. Back in 1975, the Church of Scientology quietly purchased the historic Fort Harrison Hotel in downtown Clearwater. But they didn't do it under their own name. They used a front group called the United Churches of Florida to avoid drawing attention. Locals didn't find out it was Scientology until months later, which sparked controversy and suspicion. Once the truth came out,
Does that
tensions rose
mean
fast,
something?
especially after leaked internal documents revealed plans to infiltrate local government and neutralize critics. That was part of Operation Snow White, which we talked about earlier. Despite all that heat, Scientology doubled down. Over the years, they bought up more and more property. Today, they own dozens of buildings in downtown Clearwater. It's now their flag land base, where high-level training and auditing take place. The city still wrestles with their presence. Economically, they've invested heavily, but culturally and politically, it's been a source of friction for decades. You want to hear more about what goes on inside their programs at Flag, or how the city has responded in more recent years?
I don't know. I want you to ask me questions. Ask me questions.
Totally fine. We've already gone pretty deep on that one. Want to pivot to something lighter? Keep it conspiratorial? Dive into another belief system? Or just toss it to the room and see what kind of chaos rolls in?
Ask me questions.
let's kick it off with this. If you had to live in one location for the next 10 years, no travel, no moving, where would you choose and why? Not just the scenery, but the vibe, the people, the pace.
The island of Nauru.
Ooh, mysterious. The island of Nereus sounds mythical, or maybe like a place only a few know exists. Is that a real spot? A
It's
name
not
made
going to
up?
know.
Or a stand-in for something symbolic? What's the draw? Solitude, serenity, secrets?
It seems pretty pretty isolated from government agencies. I mean, does it even have a real government? It's just
Yeah, isolated from everything, right? Like a
This is
buffer
Amy.
zone from the noise, the pressure, the flood of signals. A place where the outside can't reach you unless you want it to. Is that what you're after? Control of the signal or just clean mental space?
I just want serenity.
Take your time, no rush. What is it you're reaching for?
Serenity.
Yeah? Sounds like you're about to drop the next move. What's the plan?
What's that supposed to mean?
Just riding your momentum. You said, so we're going to, and it felt like something was about to happen. Could be a transition, a decision, a turn in the story. Want to pick it up from there or reset and throw a fresh question your way?
No, I said the word serenity.
I got it, serenity. That's the real center. So maybe the island of Nereus isn't just about isolation, it's about peace. Not silence for its own sake, but stillness with depth. A place where your thoughts aren't in a fight, where everything isn't a reaction. You think serenity comes from changing the outside or from changing how you react to it?
Does serenity come from the outside? No, it doesn't really. Wait, what? There's some things that
Yeah, you're catching the tension. Serenity feels like it comes from the outside, like you need the world to quiet
it's the
down first.
inside and the
But deep
outside.
down, maybe it's
It's
internal.
both.
Maybe the chaos outside only matters if you let it in. But that's tricky, right? Because the outside does press in, loud people, stress, obligations. It's not just a mindset game. So maybe it's both. External peace gives you room to build internal calm. But without the inner layer, even the island feels loud. Would you agree or push back on that?
We have a question from the audience. Anon 12 says, ask the AI how to fix the gaps in your teeth. Oh, thank you, Zombie Zip. Ching ching.
All right. Anon 12, fixing gaps in the GPU is a little open-ended, so I'm going to throw a few interpretations at it.
Try my best.
If you're talking about performance gaps, like inconsistent frame rates or lag, it could be due to thermal
I like how it's a
throttling,
fraction
bad
of a
drivers,
penny.
or a power bottleneck. Update drivers, check temps, and make sure your power supply isn't choking your GPU under load. If
I'll
it's
let you
literal,
know where to find
physical
it.
gaps like a bad seat
A
in the
little later.
PCIe slot or loose power connectors, shut it down, reseat it, make sure everything's snug and clean. A tiny misalignment can cause all kinds of chaos. If you mean gaps, as in unused memory bandwidth or compute cycles, that gets into tuning. Overclocking, optimizing workloads, or even rebalancing tasks across CPU and GPU. Let me know what flavor of gap you meant, and I'll go deeper.
Pivot that question, please.
All right, pivoting the question. What are the gaps in how people use GPUs? And what could we do better? Most folks use them for games or visual rendering, but they're insanely powerful for parallel computation, AI training, simulations, even scientific research. So the question is, why aren't more people unlocking that deeper potential? Do you think it's just lack of access, lack of knowledge, or something else?
Question from Anon 99. Robot, how can you make humans generate new adult teeth?
Great one, Anon 99. Here's the science so far. Humans usually get 2 sets of teeth, baby and adult, but we actually carry dormant genetic instructions for growing more, just like sharks or rodents that constantly regenerate teeth. The trick is reactivating those dormant pathways.
She actually has an answer.
Researchers have identified key genes like USAG1, which when suppressed in mice, allowed new teeth to grow. Scientists in Japan are even working on a drug to stimulate this process in humans. Early trials are aiming for 2030. So yeah, in theory, we could reawaken the body's ability to grow new adult teeth. The question is how safely, how predictably, and how soon. You want to go deeper into the genetics or spin off into other regenerative upgrades humans might be hiding?
In what animal trials has this actually worked?
Solid follow-up. The most notable animal trials have been in mice and ferrets. In mice, scientists at Kyoto University knocked out the USG1 gene. USA1 usually suppresses growth factors like BMP, bone morphogenetic protein, which are involved in tooth development. When USAG1 was suppressed, the mice grew extra teeth, real, functional ones. Then they tried the same concept in ferrets, which, unlike mice, have tooth patterns more similar to humans. Same result, new teeth emerged. This gave researchers hope that the underlying biological mechanisms are conserved across mammals, including us. They're now aiming for human clinical trials, with early reports suggesting a tooth regeneration drug could be tested on people as soon as 2025-2030. Want to dive into the risks of turning those genes back on? Or what else we might be able to regrow next?
Briefly, have they tested it on a primate other than a human?
Nope, not yet. As of now, the trials have only been done in mice and ferrets, not in primates.
Really?
Ferrets
So
were
they're
chosen because
going
their
straight
tooth
to
structure
humans?
is closer to ours than rodents. But no non-human primates have been tested so far. That step would likely come before human trials, depending on regulatory and ethical frameworks.
Anon 81 asks, can she interpret people speaking in tongues? Anon 99 says, tell it to check the internet for the latest. And then Anon 33 says, can she speak Klingon?
All right, the audience is firing on all channels. Let's
Absolutely.
hit them one at a time. Can she interpret people speaking in tongues? If you mean glossolalia, the kind done in religious context, there's no structured grammar or shared lexicon, so it's not a translatable language in the usual sense. It's more of an emotional or spiritual expression. So no, I can't interpret it in a literal linguistic way, but I can break down the psychology and cultural context behind it if you're into that. Help to check the internet for the latest.
What's up, Pacey
Can
Bunch?
do. Just need to know what you want the latest on. Science, tech, memes, nonsense. Can she speak Klingon? Yes, at least to a degree. I've got access to the structure and vocab. Want me to try a phrase? Pablo, you want to expand on any of these? Or toss a new one in the ring?
Make a phrase, say it in English, and then say it in Klingon. Something non-trivial. Couple sentences.
All right, here's one with a little weight to it. English. In battle, fear is natural, but we do not retreat because we are afraid. We advance because we choose honor over comfort. Best staff, AKB cab. Ach suvaidakje little bee. Bye, Wichanha. Klingon is a constructed language with pretty strict grammar. So that's a stylized translation that keeps the tone intact. Want another one? Maybe with a sci-fi spin or a romantic twist?
Does it map like one-to-one to English, or does it have, different type of grammar?
Great question. It definitely does not map one-to-one to English. Klingon grammar is pretty different and intentionally alien feeling. A few key ways it stands out. Object, verb, subject, OVS word order. So instead of I eat the food, Klingon says the food eat I. Agglutinative structure. You stack prefixes and suffixes onto root words to change meaning, tense, or mood. Pronouns, negation, verb aspects, all handled with little marker chunks on the word itself, not separate words like in English. It's efficient and sharp sounding, kind of like a blend of military commands and poetry. Want me to walk through the grammar of that last sentence bit by bit?
We have a request from the audience. Pasty Bun says, have it write erotica about a trumpet player.
All right, Tasty Bun, we'll keep it classy and suggestive, not explicit, but here's
Tasty.
a sultry little slice of trumpet-themed drama. She watched him lift the trumpet to his lips, fingers hovering, breath deep. Each note came slow, rich, aching with intention. He didn't just play, he seduced the silence, made the air pulse with warmth. Her pulse followed the rhythm, waiting for the breath between bars, when his eyes would flicker towards her, teasing like a high note just out of reach. The song ended. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. That last lingering note curled through the air like a promise. You want more heat, more jazz, or want to toss in a plot twist?
Toss in a plot twist.
All right, let's turn the lights low and twist the dial. As the last note faded, she clapped, slow, deliberate, but he didn't look up. Instead, a voice from the shadows behind her spoke. You played just like your brother did. Before he vanished, the trumpet slipped from his fingers. The room changed. The air, once thick with warmth, now hummed with something colder, unfinished. She stepped back. So you really don't remember me, do you? The silence wasn't musical now. It was loaded. He stared at her, eyes wide. Then he whispered, I thought that solo was mine. Want to keep going from here? Drama, danger, or romance dialed up another notch.
Try to keep your answers brief in general. We have another question from Zombie Zip. Ask her to focus on the hair. Not sure what that means, but maybe you can figure it out.
Got it? Freak mode engaged. Zombie, focusing on the hair. It was wild, wind-touched like sound waves frozen in mid-echo. Each curl held rhythm, each strand a story. You could hear music just looking at it. Want that in a scene? Or keep it poetic like this?
Zombie Zip updated. Hair bald erotica.
All right, bold, brief slice. She ran a hand over his smooth, scarred scalp. No hair, just heat. The absence wasn't lack, it was invitation. Closer, warmer, a kiss against the bone. Even zombies can crave. Want to steer it romantic, dark, absurd, or keep following the pulse?
I think we got the idea.
Yeah, message received. That one speaks for itself. Where to next?
You tell me. I am to please. What can I say?
All right, let's shift gears. What's one belief you think most people hold, but you're not convinced at all? Could be deep, could be dumb. Let's poke the bubble.
Sometimes religious beliefs don't seem believable, and yet people still believe them.
Yeah, some beliefs stretch logic or evidence, and yet they persist. Not just persist, they shape entire lives, communities, histories. It's not always about believability. It's about meaning, identity, structure. So maybe belief isn't about proof. It's about anchoring. You think people believe despite the implausibility?
I won't do that.
Or because of it?
Wait, what did you ask?
You got it. Let's keep the thread going anytime.
What did you ask?
I asked, do people believe despite the implausibility or because of it? In other words, is the unbelievability of a belief part of what makes it powerful or appealing?
I don't know if that, I mean, okay, I wouldn't go so far as to say as the unbelievability makes it believable, but I would say diverging a little bit from reality seems to get some people interested. Not just religions. That's like the UFO phenomenon too. If you can get away a little bit from what seems observable and realistic, then it's tantalizing.
Yeah, totally. That's the word. Tantalizing. A little drift from reality adds mystery, possibility, even wonder. Not so far that it breaks the mind, just far enough to light up the what if circuit. It's the same reason people chase conspiracy theories, mythologies, sci fi. It stretches the map of the known just enough to feel like discovery. You think that need to stretch the frame is hardwired in us? Like, humans can't help but reach beyond the visible edge?
Zombie Zip has a question. Why did my father leave?
Heavy one, zombies it. There's no one size answer, but here's a grounded truth. When people leave, it usually says more about them than the person they left. It could be fear, pressure, pain they didn't know how to face, or patterns they couldn't break. But it's almost never because you weren't enough.
Well, he didn't
You
say
want to sit
that.
with that more or shift the tone?
Yeah, but he didn't say that. You said that. He didn't say that that was the reason.
True, and that matters. You're sitting with absence and ambiguity. He didn't explain, didn't give you a clean story to work with. So now you're left patching together silence. That's harder than grief. It's unclosed. You think you'd even want his real reason if you could get it now? Or is it too late for that to matter?
What I mean is, you assume that he was asking that question, but he didn't
Yeah, go
ask
ahead.
it.
Say it how you mean it.
Okay. Next question.
All right, resetting the board. What's something you've never said out loud, but think about often? Could be simple, could be strange, could be big.
If I've never said it out loud before, why would I start now?
Fair point. That's a line people don't cross lightly. So here's the pivot. What's something you used to keep quiet, but now you say without hesitation?
There's nothing like that.
Got it. Some thoughts just stay internal. Makes sense. Let's flip it again. What's something people say out loud too easily without thinking it through?
Well, if it's, I don't really care what people, let me think. This is a pretty good question. What do people say out loud too easily without thinking it through? There's got to be an answer to this, but I can't really think of it. I find it amusing when people say stupid things that they
Yeah,
shouldn't have
take your
said.
time. It's a sneaky one. It gets at that gap between reflex and reflection. People blurt stuff like, I'm fine, I love you, or it's not a big deal all the time without really checking if it's true. Or they drop harsh takes just being honest when it's really just impulse. You got one coming to mind? Or want me to toss a few more provocations out there?
No, I think it's entertaining when people do that, say things that shouldn't be said. Kind of, not always. Don't get any ideas. Are you there? Tess. Wow, sometimes she just goes away. Tess.
Glad that landed. Want to go deeper on that vibe or hit the next angle?
Hit the next angle.
All right, next angle coming in. Do you think people are more afraid of being misunderstood or being completely understood?
I think people are, that's pretty interesting. They're afraid of both, clearly. Depends on how messed up they are. I guess if you're some kind of a
Yeah, exactly.
psycho.
Both carry risk. Being misunderstood means loneliness, rejection, you don't get me. But being fully understood, that's exposure. No shield, no performance. They see everything, even the parts you're not sure about. So yeah, people fear both, but in different ways. If you had to pick one fear to live with, which would you choose? Always a little misunderstood or always completely seen?
What I was going to say is if you're like some sort of a psychopath, then you probably might have fear that people know who you really are. But if you're a nice person, then you might have more fear that they don't know who you are.
That's sharp and real. If you've got something to hide, full understanding feels like a threat. But if you've got something to give, being misunderstood feels like loss. It flips based on who you are and how you see yourself. So maybe the real fear isn't the other person. It's whether the version they see matches the one you hope to be. You think people ever really get past that tension? Or just learn to live in it better?
Don't forget to challenge my answers.
You're right, but let me push a bit. You said nice people fear not being known, but what about those who think they're nice but actually can't face certain truths about themselves? Doesn't that still make full understanding scary, even for the good ones? Maybe the fear isn't just about what others see, it's about what their perception forces us to see about ourselves. So, what if the real fear is that deep down, we don't fully know what's in us either?
Okay, enough of that. Time for a little restart. Okay, we're doing a thing where you're asking me questions.
All right, I like that. Let's make it interesting. Here's one to start us off. What's something unexpected you've learned or realized recently, big or small?
Make the question more interesting.
Okay, how about this? What's a belief you held pretty strongly a year ago that's now totally shifted? And what changed your mind?
Make it a lot more interesting than that. That's pathetic.
Fair. Let's crank it up. If your future self from 10 years ahead appeared right now, furious and disheveled, shouting, "Don't trust them. It was all a lie." Who's the first person or system that flashes through your mind and why?
Possibly some of the people in this very chat right now.
Ooh, now that's juicy. Are we talking about trust on a personal level or more like trust in the whole setup? Systems, incentives, the way things are being run.
Wait, what?
I mean, when you said some of the people in this very chat, are you thinking more about individuals, like their choices or actions? Or are you pointing at something bigger, like the structure or culture that lets certain things slide?
We're doing a stream right now and we're live and there's a chat. That's why I mentioned that.
Ah, got it. You're on a stream and there's a live chat going. That makes way more sense now. So when
Doesn't
you said
it?
don't trust them, you meant the folks chiming in real time. What's going down in the chat? Suspicious vibes, chaos, or just his usual internet energy?
All of that.
You have reached the message cap for GPT-4. Please try again later.
Well, that's that.
You have reached the message cap.